This is Leaders Who Scale, and I'm Jeff Siegel. I've worked with thousands of companies over the years, and I'm fascinated by seeing how many of them grow and scale. Join me as we learn from the leaders of growing companies and share that knowledge. Leaders Who Scale is sponsored by Siegel Solutions, providing world-class accounting, advisory, and QuickBooks and Acumatica Cloud ERP services. Today's guest is an entrepreneur and a business leader. He has a knack for understanding customers and customer experiences. He's a master of masonry and a lover of landscapes with over 25 years of experience in the industry. As an entrepreneur, he purchased a landscaping company in 2017 and formed his current company in 2019 after purchasing and merging in his family's masonry business. He's now grown to 12 employees. He's a president and owner of Cliffstone Corporation. They're located in Woburn, Mass. I want to welcome Ryan Bennett.
Thanks, Jeff. I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, and thanks for being on. Over the next, half an hour to 40 minutes, I'd love to hear about how you are growing and scaling your business. So the first question I'd love to hear the answer to is, what is the most challenging aspect of scaling your business?
Yeah, for me, I feel like right now I'm kind of in the trenches of trying to figure that all out. I've grown the business now from 3 employees to 12 employees. Everything's started to grow really fast, and so going from 3, we may not have had the systems in place that we probably should have to grow. We've implemented some software in place to run the entire business that goes all the way from the administrative staff all the way out to the field guys, to keep everybody on the same page with everybody's projects, whatever their schedule may be that day. So for me, implementing those types of things in order to get to the point where this can run without me being involved in the day-to-day projects and more try to run the business as opposed to working in the business. And so I'm caught in between a little bit right now. And that's what we're working towards to get me more involved in running everything as opposed to being on the project every single day. And so that right now has been my biggest challenge with trying to scale up.
Yeah. So just kind of like you just mentioned, working on the business and in the business. So you're kind of doing both right now, it seems, right? You're probably out in the field. You're actually doing the work as well as trying to strategize and grow.
Yeah, and not as much as I was in the past, but at the same time, there are certain days at the end of the day where I just shake my head because I can't believe the amount of things that I put my hands on during the day that I probably shouldn't have. Trying to delegate tasks to different people, but you also get caught up in, some of the little things that need to get done. If you can let the guys handle the large projects and I go handle some of the small stuff on the side, the miscellaneous loose ends. But then at the end of the day, I realize, I've done an estimate, I've done some sales calls, I've done some scheduling, maybe repaired an irrigation head, and then gone over and, made sure that we've set up supplies for the next project coming up. And, a lot of that stuff really should be delegated to our staff.
Yeah.
And putting the right people in place to take care of that stuff so that that's not what my day-to-day looks like. It's a little more organized and I have a set plan in place as opposed to just sort of running around and picking up the pieces.
Yeah. I mean, do you have a plan? Like what keeps you up at night? Is it the plan to grow and what you need to do that? Or is it a lot of the current jobs and projects and things like that?
It's a little bit of a mix because I always say, we do some really nice work and I have some really great employees, and on a daily basis, the business runs fairly smooth. We don't have too many hiccups, but at the same time, my vision is that, I'm running this business with the correct people in place and the correct systems in place so that I have people that are taking care of the sales and the estimating and project managers. So I feel at the end of the day that I'm not really doing it the right way, and that piece is frustrating to me. So as good as the jobs are going and as profitable as the business is, knowing that there's probably a better way and a more efficient way to scale the business is what keeps me up at night. And then every once in a while, you get into, you run into a problem on a project, or with what's happening right now with supplies. You don't know if you're going to be able to get the supplies for the project that you have in place. So it's great to have all the work booked up for the entire season, but if you can't get the materials, then you really can't do the work. So
Right.
there's a lot more that goes into it now than pre-COVID, when I could call a supply house and have whatever I needed within a day or two. And now, if you don't have that stuff ordered 2, 3 months in advance, you're probably not going to get it. So there's a little more involved with the business now, where I can't really be sitting in an excavator and ordering projects for a job that's coming up 3 months down the line while I'm trying to work on this project. And so it starts to get to the point where I'm doing too much myself, and that's what gets you really frustrated.
What's the rest of your team like? You obviously are a small company and you're trying to grow. So you tell me about some of the other players you have on your leadership team.
Yeah, so my wife works in the office, Elisa. She runs everything in the office. She runs all of our social media, answers all the phone calls, and does all the scheduling
Hmm.
for everybody, for both sides, for the landscaping and the masonry side of the business. Um, my father comes in and works a few days a week. He's not quite ready to retire, so he really is a huge help on the masonry side. That's his specialty. So whether he's meeting with customers, doing estimates, or running a project for me, that's really his niche. And I really oversee both, but I'm the one with the experience on the landscape side, so I usually handle all the sales and estimating on the landscape side. So the three of us are really the management group that's in place right now. And then I have foremen on staff on both the landscape and masonry side that I can rely on to run the projects. It just
Yeah.
may be something that we may need to oversee, ordering supplies, materials, all that type of stuff.
So the three you, family based, basically business, do you get together? Is there like strategy sessions, or is it really at this point, because you're such a young company, where you're kind of running it from a leadership point of view? Or do you actually plan like, okay, we want to be this size or this number of employees in 3 years or 2 years or 5 years? And
Yeah, that is, yeah, and a lot of that is, my dad will be involved because he's got some experience. So a lot of the stuff that I'll bounce off of him, but it's really my wife and I that have these meetings to sit down and see where we want to go, how fast we want to grow, and so that that's sort of right now. You feel like I feel like I've hit somewhat of a roadblock of what should be the next step. What should be the next hire? We really are looking into a um, operations manager for the landscape side of the business, because that would give me a little bit of relief,
Mhm.
because that's sort of my role now on top of everything else. So to find somebody on the operations side to run that whole side of the business, to take that off my shoulders, is our main goal right now, trying to find that
Yeah.
right person. Um, and then on top of that, you know, what is most important? We could use a little more administrative help in the office. We could use some guys that could run machines, So I feel like I could make a list of 15 major wants that I'd love to have right now to make this run perfect.
Yeah.
And it's trying to figure out which one would fit us best, um, moving forward. Trying to find help. We have great employees now, and they've continued to come back year after year, and we'd love to grow, but we're sort of at the point where we really want guys with experience that we can rely on, especially on the masonry side. That's not exactly the side of the business where you can just kind of hire somebody green and let them run a project. You're always looking for guys that are green that you can train, but we're also at the point where we're doing high-end residential projects, and so you've got to have guys that understand how to build a project from start to finish.
Mhm.
And so that comes with experience, and those guys are pretty thin right now because everybody is so busy in this industry that there's not enough help to fill those positions. So what is our best move going forward if we really can't find the help, or immediately can't find the help? What is the most important position we want to fill, and then go from there?
Yeah, it's funny. I was going to ask you about who your next hire would be, but it sounds like ops is probably the biggest one right now. It as far as sales, I mean, how's the actual business itself? Are you clients coming in, looking for bids and estimates and things?
Yeah, that's you can call it a problem or a great thing to have is
Right.
we can't keep up with it. You know, it was 3 or 4 years ago we'd come out of the winter, which is sort of our slow time of the year, and we might have a month or two built up for the season, and then the phone starts ringing in the spring, and you go from there. And it's sort of Groundhog's Day every year. That's how it works. And then since COVID hit, it's totally changed where you can't keep up with the project. So sometime in August, we start scheduling for the following year.
Hmm.
And so by the time we get started this year, our year is almost entirely filled up. So everybody that's calling now is, so that's sort of the issue is if you could find more help, we could probably double or triple in size if we really wanted to. But
Right.
it's not a healthy growth because we don't have the right people in place to do that. So it's a good problem to have, but at the same time, we would like to grow a little bit and take on more projects if we could
Hmm.
find the right people in place to do it.
Yeah, and you mentioned earlier at the beginning that systems you were putting in systems to do a lot of these things. What kind of systems have you put in as a is it are they landscape oriented? Is it I'm just curious because I'm a systems guy. I'm an accountant. I'm curious all the time about what people are using out there.
Yeah, so we use a software called LMN, landscape management software, and it does everything from budgeting to estimating, timekeeping, so that you can track the guy's time and payroll,
Hmm.
and it does scheduling. So it's really from start to finish. From the second we get a phone call that comes into the office, my wife inputs it into the CRM so that we have names, address, phone numbers, how we got the lead, all that type of stuff, all inputted into the system. Then it gets scheduled to a sales call where we'll go out, meet with the customer, estimating, and then it gets scheduled into the calendar onto each crew. And then you go from there. As soon as they're complete, they'll complete the project. It gets, a message gets sent to the office and we can invoice immediately. So in that sense, it's streamlined because when we first bought the landscape business, it was, handing out binders with a list of, houses that you're going to or whatever it may be. And then,
Right.
if we didn't get to something, okay, that night, go back in the computer, erase what we did, start over for the next day. It was just constantly handing back and forth binders every day to keep track of all the work that we were doing. So once it got to that point where I realized, all right, there's got to be a better way. It was a little bit of an investment, which
Hmm.
sometimes you feel is hard to swallow. If you can do it with a pen and paper, why would you go out and spend thousands of dollars on software? Because you've been able to do it this way forever. But you've really got to realize what the return on investment is going to be by investing that money into the software so
Right.
that you've got to look a few years down the road and say, this is if we're going to get anywhere, we've got to have this. And that was sort of where I got to is my father and I always did the estimating. But if we ever wanted to get out of that role, we've got to have some sort of software in place and systems in place so that we can hire a salesman, say, look, this is how we do things. This is the software we use. Now let's go out and start selling some jobs. But if we never do that, we can never say, well, this is how we do it because this is what we think is a good way to do it. You can't teach anybody that.
Right.
So it was all a means to scaling, the business and really getting everybody on the same page, all the employees on the same page, so that every single day you're not showing up and trying to, tell everybody individually what they could be doing that day or what
Hmm.
tools they may need that day. Just assign a time saver and making things more efficient.
Yeah, you're talking about employees. Do you feel that the company has a culture, and if so, like how do you maintain that? Because everybody's on the road, right, doing jobs. Are there there's are there different crews like in masonry versus landscaping, and just curious how you kind of keep everybody on the same page as a
Yeah,
culture, more or less.
yeah, there are different crews. There's landscape crew that does maintenance, landscape install crew and masonry crew, and
Mhm.
sometimes the masonry crew is split up in two crews. And a lot of times on larger projects, we may all come together because you're doing all the hardscape and masonry to begin with, but then we've got to landscape our way out because we've ruined the, the property that we're on by bringing machine and equipment and everything else in there. So we're landscaping our way out. So there are some projects where they all work together, but I would say the majority of the time they are in separate crews. So what we've tried to do as much as possible is to show the guys how much we appreciate everything that they do, by having company cookouts, company outings. We have some stuff implemented. If we get so many positive reviews, we have another cookout, or we let the guys choose if they want to do something different, but as a group to recognize what they've done, and how much, the customers appreciate the work that they put in, and that they, to show them that the company is growing, and whatever we're getting recognized for is because of them. They're the reason that we get recognized for the work that we do. So to keep that going, and then they also hold each other accountable because, they want those positive reviews. They want to know that they did a nice job on each project. So they take pride in the work that they do. So that has been something that we've maintained for the, we put a lot of emphasis on that starting probably 3 or 4 years ago when we started to grow. When I worked with my dad, I just grew up with, it's his way or the highway type of mentality. It's an all kind of old school construction. And, so we didn't have to have, company cookouts to appreciate what we did. I mean, we were there to do a job. We knew we did a nice job, and then we moved on to the next one. And it wasn't that he didn't appreciate us. It was a smaller crew, and it was sort of an old school mentality. And now you see, when guys talk about they having trouble keeping guys, and there's just constant turnover with their company, you sort of want to look in and see, well, what's going on internally that you could change. And so I took a hard look at that, to see what could I do that could possibly show that these employees are appreciated, because I never really took into consideration, how do they feel about where they're heading, like, what direction their career is heading, or what they want to get out of this career, or on a day-to-day basis, how are they doing? And, what's going on at home? Is everything all right with their family and their friends? And there's a lot more that, as being a business owner, I didn't realize that I was going to take on my shoulders. And then you realize, in order to keep these guys coming back, there's got to be a good work environment for them to come to. And that's what we've really put an emphasis on, is to try to get that environment in place so they want to show up every day and they want to do, the type of work that we expect.
Mhm. Is there some kind of education as well that you provide? Or are I assume, you know, products change, whether it's landscaping, masonry, and you're always trying to stay up on current trends and things like that. Do you do some kind of formal education, or is it, you know, uh, kind of a job by job type of thing,
Yeah, it's and yeah, I don't think I would call it, and that's definitely one thing that we don't do the best job at, as far as like making it, you say, a monthly training meeting, or sending them someplace to get something as far as educational and new products. But in the wintertime, um, a ton of the suppliers that we use have educational videos since COVID. It really was in person, that you could go and see the new products, see what they were coming out with, meet some of the salesmen. So that's the type of stuff that we try to do to stay up with all the educational piece for the guys. Training on site a lot of times, comes into play, because every residential property is different, every project is different. So there is a lot of training that's on the fly, but we try to have, you know, any safety meetings if something comes up, and also trying to keep the guys up to date in any new products that are coming out.
Hmm. Yeah, and as far as your actual team, there's a 12 in total. Is it you have long-term employees or much turnover? I mean, there's so much going on in the labor market. We both know that, obviously, and trying to keep employees, trying to hire employees. Just curious how that's affecting you um, in your business. Yeah.
Yeah, so my lead foreman for our masonry actually started working for my father. I believe he's been around now 35 years.
Wow.
And last year, my landscape foreman was around about that same amount of time, and he finally just retired, so he could enjoy some time off. But So those were our two longest tenured guys. And the rest of my crew has been here a minimum of 5 years,
Okay.
4 or 5 years. And that I feel like the first year I was in business, I mean, I had, if I could get somebody to stay a month, that, it was good. We had our core guys, but all the new guys that were coming in, it was a month and they were gone, a month and
Mhm.
they were gone. You just kept cycling through. And that's sort of when I came to the realization, all right, we've got to figure out what we're doing, because we felt like it was a good environment. But for new guys, we didn't know what we could do to attract people to come and stay. And so that's why I feel like the changes that we've made have obviously helped, because the guys come back year after year. Um, so it is a good work environment. So that's the other piece of that is any new hires that come in have got to be able to gel with these guys that are here, because we have some good cohesiveness going on, and we don't want to bring in somebody that's going to take everybody down. And it doesn't take long to send somebody out with a crew, and all of a sudden you start seeing morale coming down, and the guys aren't overly thrilled about going out and doing what they're doing. So um, that type of communication has got to be open at all times to find out, all right, how do you guys feel? How's this working out? Any changes that we can make? It's got to be constant to make sure that, check in with the guys and find out where their heads are at.
Yeah. I know when we hire somebody, we have a set of core values and we try to check the boxes off on whether they meet them right from the recruiting side. And that's through we practice EOS, the EOS system. I'm not sure if you do any of those scaling up EOS, but we even every week when we meet, we have like here's our core values, and they get a plus or a minus. And we noticed that if they have a couple minuses in some of those values, they're not really the right employee. You kind of find out anyway. You don't have to do the exercise because, like you mentioned, morale, you start seeing it, and they either have to be, trained up to say, hey, you're going to be, you're a good employee, or they have to go. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I just went to with Will Scott with EO,
Oh yeah.
and that's exactly what it was all about. And about halfway through, the light bulb really went off. Like, all right, this is something that we sort of talk about, but we don't really implement. And in order to have these changes that we want to make, we really have to make this the main foundation of what we're doing here. As opposed to it's in my head or it's in conversations with my wife and I. We've really got to get the guys to buy into these core values and hold them accountable. Because that's the only way that I can see that you can evaluate your employees as to whether or not they're long term, or what can you do to help them become a better employee.
Mhm.
Is to have these core values in place and to have some sort of scale that you can keep track of, where are we at. And to hear some of these other business owners say that, I mean, that's literally how they hold their employees accountable, and their employees hold each other accountable, is to say, are you living up to these core values each day to make this company better?
Yeah, no, it's interesting because when we went through that process, we we picked our best employees and then tried to figure out what were the values that they had. Like what made them our best employees?
Yeah.
They're loyal, or they showed up on time, or they went the extra mile. And then we created our values based on that. Because I think a lot of people think that the core values are what you tell the public. For us, it
Yeah.
was internally, what as a company, what was our values and how do we hire and how do we look at our employees? So I think it's a good exercise to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, and so are you like a financial person as well? Do you look at your numbers and figure out, how are we doing quarter to date, year to date? Do you have a budget? You try to, as not on a project basis, but mostly as a company, overall company basis.
Yeah, yeah. So we said, and obviously I have an accountant and
Mhm.
to take care of all the bookwork and stuff like that. But yeah,
Sure.
we come up with our budget for the year, as to where we want to be, and we try to stick to that as close as possible or exceed it, if we
Mhm.
can. I'm constantly looking at my numbers, whether it's daily or weekly, and then after each job that we do, run a job cost analysis and see how we made out on that project because
Yeah.
a lot of times, it's I'm the one doing the estimating, so there's no way that we can change any mistakes if I don't figure out, you know, on each project where do we exceed and where do we fall short.
Hmm.
Um, and in this time, with material costs have completely skyrocketed for us this year. It didn't really hit us until this year. The last few years, it's gone up, hot faster than it was in years past, maybe
Hmm.
gone up from 3% to 5%. But in this last year, I mean, we're seeing 20% increases. It's through the roof. And it's not, it used to also, in some ways, be set in the spring.
Yeah.
What are the supplies going to cost us this year? And it would always stay fairly close to that. We've already had 2 or 3 price changes on materials since the beginning of March. So it's a constant battle of making sure that you're keeping track of what you're spending on materials. Labor costs have gone way up for us as well. So this year alone, I think for any businessman has got to be a huge transition because you're almost changing on the fly. It used to feel comfortable coming out of the winter with your budget, with your payroll, where you're going
Hmm.
to be at, and you just can't do it like that anymore. You've really got to stay on top of all that stuff constantly and make changes on the fly to make sure that you are staying profitable and you can stay in business.
Yeah. Do you have to at times, depending on when the jobs are bid, go back to a customer and say, look, I gave this estimate, 2 months ago or 60 days ago. The materials actually are higher now. Like, is that something that you may have to do at times, or is,
Yeah, yeah, and I've always, really prided ourselves on the fact that when we give you an estimate and we have a signed contract, that's the signed contract. We're not going to come back to you at the end of the job and say, we didn't realize this. Sorry,
yeah.
and change the price on them. I mean, it's our responsibility to go out there and figure out the project and what it's going to cost the customer, and that's why we're professionals. We go out there and we know what it takes to get the project done. There are no surprises, and so that's what we've always prided ourselves on. Unfortunately, with the jobs that we signed last August, the material costs are nowhere near that. So I've always put in the contracts that the materials are based on today's prices and they are subject to change. And so leading up to each project, I always give the customer a call and say, look, I've done the research. We're ready to order your supplies, but there's been a price increase. Are you still okay with this price increase? And the labor we can stay the same. We're not going to change the labor or anything like that. But material costs, um, because they've gone up so much, we just can't eat that cost. In years past, if there was a 1 or 2% difference, it's not a game changer on a project. So rather than make waves, just we would always just leave it as is because you can always get by on that. But with
Mhm.
a 20% price increase on a large scale project, you just can't eat that
Yeah.
cost. So
Or
luckily, the customers have understood because it's happening with everything they do in their everyday lives. It's not just the hardscape project in the backyard. So, um, but yeah, it's really that part kind of it is tough to go back to the customer and say, look, this is the huge pricing. You almost want to show them your estimate to say, look, this is what it was and this is what it is. But for the
yeah.
for the most part, it's gone fairly well with that.
Yeah. I mean, it must be tough because, it's going up that much. And I don't know whether some of it, you actually take a hit to your margin a little bit because you're like, hey, look, it's gone up so much. I can't chart, maybe I have to bring my margin down slightly, but I'm not sure whether you just have enough work where you don't have to do that. Hey, it went up 20%, we have to go up 20%. And so, it's an interesting problem with,
Yeah, yeah. I think it really depends on the actual cost of the material. I mean, some of the stuff you can get away with. It's a few dollars here and there, but if you're doing a large scale patio or something like that, and the price increases $3,000, then you've got to talk to the customer about that.
yeah,
You don't want to take that hit on the project. Some of the small stuff, might go up $2 or $3 or whatever it may be, and you eat it. You're not going to nickel
yeah,
and dime everything.
sure. And what do you do for your own like professional development, whether it's as a business owner and strategy and things like that, as well as product in landscaping, masonry. I assume you're spending most of your time kind of professionally trying to learn how to grow a business and scale it.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that, yeah, it's probably a wide range. I mean, I'm always, because a large part of my job is sales, so I'm always staying up to date with um the latest materials that are coming out and products that come out. I also stay on top of the newest type of equipment, technology, software, any of that stuff that could possibly help us become more efficient. Um, I've recently joined EO Boston to help, myself be around some like-minded entrepreneurs that could help me in
Oh,
some of these roadblocks that I've run into. And I always seek out other professionals that are in my industry or in other industries that have scaled and have been successful. And I can see, that's someplace I'd like to be. And you can tell when they have a run well business. You go there and just pick their brain and say, look, I like what you have going on. I'd like to get there someday. How did you do it? You know,
mhm.
and you'd be amazed at the type of information that people are willing to give if you just sit down and talk to them. Everybody wants to help each other, but you've got to go out. You've got to ask the right questions,
Sure.
and that's the only way we're gonna learn and grow. Because this is all now new to me, figuring out what's the best way to get to where I want to go. Because I've got a million different ideas, but I don't have all the answers.
Yeah. When I'm just curious, when did was there a switch that flipped at one point where like you obviously enjoy what you do, you're passionate about landscaping and masonry, but was there a switch that happened like I love all the stuff, but God, I like really growing and scaling a business too, or I really want to spend more time doing that because that's really becomes, you know, the passion or
Yeah,
yeah. Yeah.
I would say, yeah, I would say it was probably, 3 years ago or so that I really went from, I always wanted to be the best operator and build the best patios and have the nicest projects. I mean, that was always a goal that I always set. Was competitive nature, was to have that stuff, and know that I was the guy that could do kind of the best work. Little internal competition with the other guys we worked with or whatever it was. But then once I started running the business, the passion turned from, all right, I know how to build patios and have nice designs and landscaping, but what I really want is I want to run a successful business. And then it was sort of deep diving into, all right, what does it take to run a successful business? And that is now my drive is
Mhm.
how and that's why I say that's where the frustration comes, with knowing that there's probably a better way, a more efficient way to run a successful business. Is I feel like we're doing pretty good the way we're at now, but it's not the way that I want to run the business. It's not the rat race that I want to be in on an everyday basis. I really want to put all my energy into doing it the right way, and really having a nice scaling business going forward. So that's really where my passion is now, is seeking out any information I can get to make this thing a really nice business to run going forward. Because the way that I'm doing it now, it's sort of like you said, I just hit a major roadblock where it was just like, I can't keep doing it the way that I'm doing it. So what can we do to change this so that I'm not, going 150 miles an hour every
Sure.
day, and, at the end of the day, feeling like half the things still didn't get accomplished that I really wanted to get accomplished, and figuring out where what are the most important things that I should be doing, and delegating to other people. It's clearly gone from a nice small business, family owned business, to where we're at today. It just got to a point where we realized, all right, we can't keep doing things the way we've always done them.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's what I've noticed talking to a lot of business owners, including just myself, my own business, is that, at the early days, you're just getting clients, you're kind of just making it work. And then you get to a point where like systems need to be upgraded because now you can't keep up, like you said, pen and binders and paper. And so it sounds like you've kind of gone through that, hurdle, but then it's the next thing, or maybe around the same time, it's the people, like the right people. You mentioned earlier, like an ops person, and someone like your wife, like the back office people who make sure the contracts are signed and, the website's up to date and, the systems are all working properly. I think you go through these points, where you start to probably think about you're doing a lot more strategy, like, hey, where do I want to be in 2 years, 3 years? So you're really at the visionary side. Um, but it's all those other pieces. That's all part of scaling. So it's interesting hearing your journey
Yeah,
especially
because you,
yeah on the
you
front
you
end.
feel it on you feel it on the fly. You just you
Yeah.
realize that all right, maybe you always felt like we could handle everything internally, and then all of a sudden it gets to a point, and you're like, all right, are we at the point where we should probably hire somebody else for this position or for that position? Because it's
Mhm.
now getting to the point where we're spending too much time and energy in places that we shouldn't. And it's the knowledge of when's the right time to hire that person. When that next person is always expensive. So do you take
Yeah.
that leap, and are you ready to take that leap? And so it's that whole world of unknown that you're not sure. And not only you're not sure, but because you're not sure, is it this hire or that hire, or is it this piece of equipment, or
Right.
it's all those unknowns. And that sort of, when we hit that point there, it was like, all right, we really got to buckle down and come up with some plans for the future and figure out where we're going.
Yeah, I noticed with us, same thing. We hired people to do accounting and things. Clients trying to handle them, and what do we hire them ahead of time, or do we, when the clients come, go out and find people? And it's a challenge. I mean, we now try to hire ahead of time, but it's really that commit. You're like, all right, I'm going to commit to do it. It work finds us as soon as we hire people. So it's interesting. We always feel like the minute we get someone in, we fill them up. So now maybe I've turned the corner even as a business owner where I'm not afraid to hire somebody if I think I know that I need them. So it's before I was
Yeah.
hesitant, like, should I wait? And that's interesting.
Yeah, I've said the same thing, is that every time that I've made a decision that's made my stomach turn, or how are we going to be able to handle this, or this could turn out bad. You just realize that you know it seems to always work out in the end. If you make the right decisions, um, and I feel like we have a good foundation in place. So by making some of those decisions, they have worked out well, and you say, what was I so worried about? I should have,
Right.
and it's the same thing with having an employee move up in position or giving them more responsibility. You always look back and say, man, why did I wait so long? They
Right.
were ready. They could have been ready. Sometimes I feel like I'm the roadblock, because I've got so much going on that you can't see what's beyond what the blinders, and then you all of a sudden you come out and you just feel like it's an epiphany, like, oh, I've just come up with this idea. And you're like, well, why didn't I think of that 6 months ago? Why am I just coming up with that now? So
Yeah.
it's
It's hard because we're like, we want to like control everything, I think, as leaders.
yeah.
And maybe we stifle sometimes growth. If we just have to really see the people and go, hey, we can put them in that position. And if they fail, well, it's okay. People
Yeah.
make mistakes. That's how they're going to learn. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, putting a little too much pressure on failing, and it's not always failing either. I mean, that sounds like it's the be all end all, but it can be a small mistake. It can be, oh, we got to fix it on the fly, but it's not like it's going to put you out of business by making some of these decisions. And sometimes that's the pressure that you put on yourself.
Right.
Things are going just fine the way they are. If we make this decision, it could really make some waves. And do we really want to deal with those waves? But
Yeah.
all part of being a business owner.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, what's your biggest what's the future look like in your industry, and what do you see for growth, from your point of view? I've talked to owners who they're into like they want to acquire other companies, or they want to grow organically. I'm just curious what your just kind of long-term vision. What do you see for your
Yeah,
company?
so now we're toying around a little bit with the winter months. We're into snow plowing, commercial snow plowing.
Mhm.
I don't love the idea that we are dependent on weather for that. And some of our stuff is seasonal, so you're going to have a full season contract one way or the other, but some of the other contracts aren't. And so, in order to keep your employees all year long, you've got to have the work throughout the year to keep them
Right.
on, or you end up laying them off, and then you don't know if they're going to come back. So to get out of that cycle, we've looked into a few different businesses that we're going to do a little more research on, but it's something that type of business, their busy months are in the winter
Mhm.
when we slow down. So it would be an opportunity to keep our guys on in the winter and keep everybody busy. And I think it would be a nice addition to what we're doing. And I always keep the door open for the possibility of a landscape business that might be selling, to
Mhm.
purchase another one like we did in 2017, because
Nice.
that for me was the easiest way to grow. Is much. headache and stuff that goes into that, and buying a business and getting it set up, and employees and equipment and all that stuff. That was sort of a turnkey operation that we just had to make some tweaks to fit our model.
Hmm.
But they had the customer base, they had the employees, they had the equipment, as opposed to starting from ground zero and trying to grow that way. I think that that would probably be our next best bet on the landscape side, is to do that. I think that scaling the landscape side is easier because recurring revenue. It's, the hardscape stuff, you might do a patio for somebody and then you don't see them again for 25 years.
Right. Yeah.
So it's a little more difficult to scale that side of the business than it is the landscape side of the business. So that's more the side where between the landscape and the snow, um, it's all the same stuff over and over again. So
Right.
it's a little easier to train guys. And the equipment all works the same, whether it's for snow or for landscape, and you can use it both. So
Hmm.
that's where I see our future going forward. But it's also, for me, very difficult to see that until I put some people in place
Right.
to help take some weight off my shoulders. Every time you think about growing, it's, well, I don't know if I can handle any more than what I have on my plate. So it doesn't
Yeah.
seem like a reality. So they're gonna have to come in pieces. But that is our plan, is to grow.
Nice. Cool. All right. Well, I'm glad we talked about a lot of that stuff. I'm curious just about you, personally. You were from the Woburn area, I guess, right? You grew up
Yes.
there, and did you go into landscaping as a career? How did you end up getting involved in that in the first place?
So I did. I grew up in Woburn. I live in Wakefield, Mass now, but I
Mhm.
grew up in Woburn, and the masonry business, I think I said, was my father's business.
Yep.
So it was something that I grew up in. That's where I was in the summers. Eighth grade, ninth grade is pretty much when I started full time in the summer, and after school, and so I worked there all through high school and all through college. And my father was determined to have me do something else besides get into the masonry business, because it was, it's heavy lifting, it's hard labor. There's really not a whole hell of a lot that's easy about that type of business.
Yeah.
Um, so I did. I went out when I got out of college. It was I graduated with criminology and sociology, and was thinking I'd get into some form of law enforcement. And
Hmm.
probably 2 or 3 years after I got out of school, I really got the itch to get involved with business and run a business. Um, and so that's when I talked to my dad about possibly coming back, and having him, show me the ropes about how to run the business, and get more involved. Because really, when I was summer help, that's all I was summer help. I couldn't wait for the day to be over so I could, go hang out with friends. I wasn't
Sure.
there to learn the business or anything like that. So that's when I got back involved with him, and worked every day until 2017. Probably from about 2004 to 2017, I worked full time for him.
Wow.
And then the landscape business was an opportunity that sort of got dropped in front of me. And that was not the plan. The plan was to work and buy my father's business and continue that on. But I always wanted to expand the business into the landscape side, because a lot of the projects that we do are in people's backyards. We're doing patios and walls and fire pits. And then another landscape company would come in and get to do all the planting and the sod and the irrigation. And I just always saw it as an opportunity that we were missing. Um, and we had thought about maybe starting out with some, landscaping, but that startup cost was always so high that we just didn't seem to. It just never seemed like a good fit. So when the landscape business came up, I thought it was a good enough opportunity that I jumped on it. So
Nice.
for a couple of years, I sort of worked with running the landscape company, but also worked for my father. Um, because I was his lead foreman, and was running the projects for him. So and then when he retired in 2019, I bought his business, and combined the two.
Nice. And then, so, all right. So I know landscaping takes up a ton of time. What do you do outside of work? What are your passions?
So I've always been involved with sports growing up. I love anything to do with sports. I love golfing. And now I have my wife Elisa, and I have two daughters, Riley and Taylor, that are both involved in any sport that you can think of. So a lot of our time outside of work is going, to the kids' games, kids' practices, stuff like that. I love skiing in the winter. My family's involved with skiing, and in the summertime, it's golf. And my in-laws have a place on a lake where we have a boat, so we spend a lot of time there. on the boat in the summertime. So I like almost anything outdoors, and love to get away from the business on the weekends if I can, because
Yeah.
really that's where my head's at. Anytime I'm sitting still, that's what I'm thinking about. So
Mhm.
if I can get away and get a breather from that, then that's what we try to do.
Are you able to get away weekends? Even as long as
Yeah.
yep.
Yeah, no, I try to put an emphasis on that, for a long time when I was coming up the ranks, it was a 6 days a week. It's a seasonal business. There are no days off, that type of thing. You have limited time to get, projects done. And I've really tried to scale that back a little bit, because I find that the guys get burnt out when they're working 6 days a week, 7 days a week.
Yeah.
You don't get what you'd like to get out of them on Monday. If they worked all day on Saturday, they barely had any time with their family and to decompress. So I really do. We try to keep it to a 5-day work week if we possibly can, and everybody take the weekends off. So if
Nice.
that's been a huge part of what we try to do.
Awesome. All right. Well, where can people find you if they want to connect? I know you're on LinkedIn, right?
I'm on LinkedIn. Yep. We also are on Cliffstone Corp on Instagram. My wife updates that usually on a daily basis of all the projects that we're working on. And we have a website that is cliffstonecorp.com.
Cool. And your LinkedIn is Ryan Bennett.
Ryan Bennett.
For
That's right.
you. Cool. Awesome. No, I thank you for your time. This is kind of a good learning experience for me. I love talking to entrepreneurs, especially with you, where you're kind of still new and growing and just kind of learning about what you're trying to do to grow, and the successes you're having, it sounds like, which is great. And just the whole merger of your father's business with the previous one that you bought, trying to grow, it's a testament to you, what you've done, which is awesome. I want to thank everyone who's listening. If you like it, I encourage you to share it. Hopefully you learned something today. I know I did. And again, I want to thank you, Ryan, and thanks everyone. I'll see you next time. And this has been another episode of Leaders Who Scale. And that wraps up another episode. Thank you for joining. For show notes and other episodes, visit us at leaderswhoscale.com. Leaders Who Scale is sponsored by Siegel Solutions, providing world-class services and cutting-edge tools that help businesses grow and succeed.